Today, we'll be revisiting the year 2010 to discuss the Togolese Nightmare Act. On September 4th, 2006, the Confederation of African Football made several announcements regarding the host selection for the biggest footballing event of the continent. According to the CAF, the upcoming 3 African Cup of Nations tournaments starting from 2010 were to be held in Angola, Gabon, and Equatorial Guinea in a co-hosted edition, and Libya, respectively. 2-time former hosts Nigeria were also among the candidates for 2010, but CAF favored Angola to encourage the country to move towards peace after coming out of a 3-decade-long civil war. Nigeria was selected as the reserve host in the event that any of these 4 nations did not meet the hosting requirements. In the end, Nigeria was not needed, but that did not change the fact that one of the most horrifying football stories was going to take place during the year Angola hosted the tournament. While Angola was preparing for the event, so were the teams that were about to compete, including the Togolese team led by their star player, Emmanuel Adebayor. The Sparrowhawks had already proven themselves 4 years prior by qualifying for the World Cup for the first time in their history. The modest nation of 6 million people had the best generation of footballing talent available to them, and they were ready to leave yet another mark on their continent. Despite being in one of the tougher groups of the tournament with Ghana, Burkina Faso, and Ivory Coast, the Togolese had high hopes. What ended up happening couldn't have been further from their expectations. The Angolan Civil War was over, but the country still had open wounds caused by it. Many regions and provinces were scarred by terrorists and separatist groups, including the infamous Cabinda province. The CAF knew full well that the region was war-torn and dangerous, but still went ahead in selecting it as one of the 4 regions that would host matches for the tournament. Their hopes were to improve the notorious reputation of the province, the very same province that the Togolese needed to journey through by bus to get to their first match in their group. It was a terrible decision that paved the way for a disaster. On January 8th, the Togolese team took to the road to go to Cabinda. Everyone was in high spirits. Players were singing and dancing as they felt happy and proud for the opportunity to represent their country once again on a big stage. Their 2-bus convoy, one carrying the players and staff and the other loaded up with luggage, was accompanied by Angolan forces. As they made their way through the Mayombe rainforests, all hell broke loose. A group of armed men belonging to the Front for the Liberation of the Enclave of Cabinda, also known as FLEC, opened fire on everyone in sight, including the bus carrying 23 players and 11 staff members. As soon as those on the bus recognized the danger, they threw themselves to the ground in an attempt to protect themselves. Unfortunately, the driver of the bus, Mario Ahula, was unable to react quickly enough and was shot by the terrorists, losing his leg and his life immediately. With their already slim chances of escaping gone, the security personnel accompanying the team fired back, but their limited numbers made it difficult to defend against the attackers. The scene inside the bus was one of fear and pain, and several people, including reserve goalkeeper Kajobi Obilale, center-back Serge Akakpo, manager Huber Velud, assistant manager Amelie Abalo, and sports commentator Stanislas Aklu were shot and severely injured. Abalo and Aklu were rushed to a nearby hospital, but unfortunately they passed away the following day. Thomas Dossevi later described the attack as being mowed down with machine guns for 20 minutes until it finally ceased and the terrorists fled the scene. The full gravity of the situation became apparent shortly after, and according to Mustafa Salifu, who was an Aston Villa player at the time, it could have been much worse. He recalled that when they crossed the border into Angola, the 2 buses swapped places, and as they drove into the forest, if this hadn't happened, there would have been more fatalities. However, the aftermath of the attack was far from great. Less than 24 hours later, while people were still grappling with how an international football team could be attacked in such a manner, the discussion had already shifted to whether the African Cup of Nations should continue. The team's spiritual and on-field leader, Emmanuel Adebayor, spoke to BBC Radio 5, saying, I think a lot of players want to leave. I don't think they want to be at this tournament anymore because they have seen their death already. After a meeting with his teammates, the world-renowned striker helped them refocus on their priorities. After the attack, there was no consideration of delaying the tournament, and even worse, Ghana and the Ivory Coast announced that they would play their games in Cabinda as scheduled. This put both the Togolese squad and the government in a difficult position. Some players wanted to play in honor of their fallen and injured friends, while others wanted to return home, as directed by the Togolese government. After 3 days of national mourning, the Sparrowhawks wanted to rejoin the tournament, but their request was denied by the CAF. In fact, on the day of the attack, CAF officials made multiple declarations absolving themselves of responsibility and almost blaming the Togolese team for not following security guidelines. In addition to denying the team's request to rejoin the tournament, CAF banned the Togo national team from participating in the next 2 editions of the tournament, citing the Togolese government's involvement in the matter as an infringement. This absurd decision was eventually overruled by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The Togolese people were left devastated by the attack, which took just 20 minutes to rob them of their best generation of footballers, either through the attack itself or its lasting psychological effects. To this day, it remains unclear why the team chose to take the road that led to the tragedy instead of flying to Angola's capital. But one thing is certain, it was one of the worst football disasters in history.